It's obviously a different scandal from the Jeffrey Epstein one. That was very much a sex scandal, and although obviously there was some money involved, because I believe Epstein paid off some of the Duchess of York's debts, and in fact it was through Fergie that Andrew met Epstein in the first place. But this is a very serious matter, because if you've got someone who's a spy in and out of royal residences, who knows what they might stumble across. So it is a very big scandal. I'm not saying that Andrew's the only one to blame. Obviously, the Chinese have been doing this for years, and they've been infiltrating all sorts of echelons of British society, try and find out things and influence things. But it is a very serious matter. But in terms of what he's going to do in the future, he's been stripped of his royal duties, stripped of his military titles. It's very difficult to know what he can do all day long, apart from go riding and play golf. Very difficult to see a charity taking him on so that he can kind of work away quietly, a la sort of Profumo, and restore his reputation. There was a report in the Sunday Times that he's actually thinking about starting a completely new life in the Middle East, possibly in the UAE or Bahrain or somewhere like that, where he's always had close ties and close friends who he knew when he was the roving trade ambassador. And to be honest, that wouldn't surprise me. I think it might get to the point where if he's forced out of his home and he feels he's got absolutely no future in the UK, he might well think about starting a new life somewhere else. And as I say, much as he's brought a lot of this on himself, you couldn't really blame him for that, because there doesn't seem to be much prospect of any future for him here.
This guy has, been seen with former prime ministers as well, so it's not like Andrew's the only one who's had any kind of dealings with him. Is it just the risk that people like the royals take by kind of being introduced to a lot of different people, and it's not necessarily their fault?
Well, I think it happens with all the royals. I mean, the king himself in the past certainly has been accused of hobnobbing with various people for his charities over the years. He's been linked with all sorts of people who, he probably shouldn't have done. And of course, there are on several occasions, his sort of closest aide and sort of right hand man, if you like, Michael Fawcett, kind of took the rap for him almost, and fell on his sword, and two or three times left his employ. And I think, to be honest, King Charles would still have Fawcett working for him today if he could do, but he's been involved in so many of these sort of scandals that I think it's impossible for him to come back. And I think certainly Queen Camilla put her foot down and said there was no way that he could come back. So yes, I think all the royals are prone to this, particularly in Andrew's case, where he's got no real sort of source of income. He's got a very small annual naval pension from his time in the Navy. I think that's only about £20,000 a year. He used to get £250,000 a year from the what was the civil list, and then was changed over the years, the different names for it. But he was getting money from that, courtesy of his mother, distributing the main funds from the sovereign grant and from the civil list. So he was getting in that money, but there's always the danger that with the upkeep of Royal Lodge, and now with the security that he's got to pay for, because he's had the security costs taken away from him, he's had that finance taken away from him by the king, that he's going to sort of stumble into these sort of problems, and when money's available, he's going to make some wrong decisions. So it's a difficult one, but it doesn't excuse getting involved with not checking people out properly. The people around him should be checking people and making sure that they don't have dodgy backgrounds.
Yeah, and obviously the kind of the leaked letter from Dominic Hampshire to this guy, implies this idea that they were able to kind of get people in and out of Royal Lodge without, much notice. Is that a common thing, that, like, not necessarily for dodgy characters, but the royals will have to have a certain level of privacy, and they don't necessarily want everyone knowing exactly what they're doing at all times? So would it be common for royal properties to have almost like hidden passages or hidden ways in and out?
I, I don't think there's anything particularly hidden about it. Obviously, places aren't being monitored all the time. They've got CCTV, obviously, and up until recently, the police presence at Royal Lodge. But it's not up to the police to vet Andrew's friends or to vet his business associates. They're just there to basically to protect him. So it's not the role of Scotland Yard or the police to moralise about who he's seeing or what he's doing. It's just their job to protect him. So they're the only people who are there all the time. And it's not, as I say, it's not their duty to do that. But yes, if this chap Yang Tengbo, whatever his name is, was invited to Royal Lodge, and if he met other people and met other members of the household, possibly met B and Eugenie, no one would really know about it necessarily. And if he became a friend, he became a friend like lots of other people who Andrew's known over the years. But as I say, it's backfired on him dramatically. And on top of the Epstein thing, it's kind of a final nail in his coffin, really.
I mean, do you think there's this idea of you've got people like Andrew and then to a certain extent Harry as well, who are kind of these spare royals that don't necessarily, as they get older, have a particularly defined role. So they end up, do you feel like they almost see themselves as kind of out on their own? They're able to speak to people, make friends with people that maybe people on the sort of closer to the king, or if they were the monarch, they'd be kind of advised better, like, just steer clear of Epstein or steer clear of this guy. Do you think there is that element to it?
I think there's always been a problem with the spares. We had it with Princess Margaret, the Queen's younger sister. We had it with Prince Andrew, and now we're getting it with Harry. They're royal. They probably have a certain amount of inbuilt arrogance because of their position and their status and who they are, but they don't really have a defined role as such, and so they have spare time on their hands. Now, in the case of Andrew, in the case of Harry, it was all great when they were in the military because they had a purpose in life. They enjoyed being in the armed forces, and they both did a good job. So for those that decade or so that both of them were in the armed forces, that was the best place for them. Once they come out of that, then they start to cast around. It's very difficult to find a role that suits them, and I think that's one of the major problems. We saw Princess Margaret, probably turned to a fairly hedonistic lifestyle because she was bored and didn't really have much to do, or didn't carve out a proper role for us. I don't think it stopped them finding proper roles for themselves and getting involved with all sorts of causes and charities, which of course they do to some extent. But it's kind of left up to them, and without the advice of the top courtiers, they can sometimes go astray.
I mean, it's hard to say really what Andrew's going to do, but what's he going to be thinking now? What's he going to be planning to do in the near future? Is it just continue to lie low and kind of randomly pop up at things and then
I think Andrew was always intending that he would, still take part in family occasions like Christmas, like he last summer he went up and stayed up at Balmoral. His whole family went up there and stayed with the king. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall over dinner at night when they, as the antlers of the stags on the walls were listening in on their conversation. I'd love to have heard what they were saying, but it must have been a strange atmosphere because obviously the elephant in the room, not just the stags in the room, but the elephant in the room was obviously what's going to happen to Andrew and whether or not he can stay at Royal Lodge. So I don't know how much they just put that to one side and enjoy their holiday. But certainly, he would always have intended to have carried on being included in family get-togethers like Christmas and like some holidays. I think it's getting to the point now where he's literally sort of people are putting pressure on him to become a sort of total outcast. And as I say, I would have thought an option for him is to go off, and he's only in his early 60s. I would have thought with the friends he's got, going off and starting a new life, perhaps somewhere else in possibly the Middle East, might be the best bet for him.
yeah, and obviously we've spoke about kind of King Charles's kind of attitude towards it and Andrew, but we've kind of had suggestions before that he's maybe a little more lenient than, for example, Prince William towards Andrew and his involvement with the royal family. Do you think that how do you think William will see this? Will he just see this as another embarrassment, an issue, or is he just completely done with Andrew and that's
Yeah, I think William is one of the driving forces behind this. I think that the king is at the end of the day, Andrew is his younger brother, and he knows how close he was to their mother, the late Queen, and how fond she was of Andrew. So I think he probably has been quite fairly lenient towards him, and I think it probably pains him to try and force him out of his home and to sanction him in that way. I think William is a bit more hard nosed about it. I think he thinks that the future of the monarchy is down to him and Kate, and he's got to concentrate on that. He's already got all the problems of not being supported now by Harry and Meghan. So I think he really sees it as just holding the line until his children are a bit older and they can start performing duties, and he just doesn't see a role for Andrew. So I think hard as it is, I think that's the way it's going to continue.